Gopi Janavala Giridharadari Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Kiravanachari Yamuna Kiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabihari Gopi Janavala Giridharadari So we're going to be finishing off chapter 16 of the third canto. So we're going to be reading from 26 to 37. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Om Namo Vasudevaya.
Okay, we can do this together. Before reciting this Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very essence of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the person of your Godhead, unto Narayana, supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, Goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasa, by regular attendance, and by regular service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, with praise and transcendental songs, is established as the irreparable battle. Okay, we can just jump straight into it. We can just start with reading text 26.
Lord replied, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought through mental concentration intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly.
Lord Brahma said, after seeing the Lord Vaikuntha, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, in the self, illuminated by Vaikuntha planet, the sages left that transcendental abode.
The sages circumambulated the Supreme Lord, offered their obeisances, and returned, extremely delighted at learning of the divine opulences of the Vaishnava.
The Lord then said to his attendants, Jai and Vijay, depart this place, but fear not. All glory is unto you. Though I am capable of nullifying the Brahmana's curse, I would not do so. On the contrary, it has my approval.
This departure from Vaikuntha was foretold by Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune. She was very angry because when she left my abode and then returned, you stopped her at the gate while I was sleeping.
The Lord assured the two Vaikuntha inhabitants, Jai and Vijay, by practicing the mystic yoga system in anger, you will be cleansed of the sin of disobeying the Brahmanas, and within a very short time return to me.
I just wanted to make a quick little comment on that particular text. Krishna is saying to Jai and Vijay that they will still come back to him even though they are practicing bhakti in anger. So I found that very interesting because, you know, in this material world, we think of anger as like this terrible thing. It's so funny. We had Madhuskava on Tuesday giving the class, and she was saying these are like the things that we shove into the dark place, you know, but we actually need these things to grow down so that we can grow up, you know. So I found it so interesting that he was saying that even if you practice bhakti in anger, you will still come back to me. Because what happens when we're like angry at something or angry with someone? Yeah, we focus on it. We're just so fixated. That's like our mind is just on it constantly. So even if you're practicing bhakti in anger, your mind is concentrated on Krishna and you will still go back to him. So that's what he was saying. And I found that really interesting. Okay, continue.
After thus speaking at the door of Vaikuntha, the Lord returned to his abode, where there are many celestial airplanes and all surpassing wealth and splendor.
But those two gatekeepers, the best of the demigods, their beauty and luster diminished by the curse of the Brahmanas, became morose and fell from Vaikuntha, the abode of the Supreme Lord.
Then, as Jai and Vijay fell from the Lord's abode, a great roar of disappointment arose from all the demigods who were sitting in their splendid airplanes.
Lord Brahma continued, those two principal doorkeepers of the personality of Godhead have now entered the womb of Diti, the powerful semen of Kashya Muni having covered them.
It is the prowess of these twin asuras, demons, that has disturbed you, for it has minimized your power. There is no remedy within my power. However, if it is the Lord himself who desires to do all this.
My dear sons, the Lord is the controller of the three modes of nature and is responsible for the creation, preservation, and dissolution of the universe. His wonderful creative power, Yogamaya, cannot be easily understood even by the masters of yoga. That most ancient person, the personality of Godhead, will alone come to our rescue. What purpose can we serve on his behalf by deliberating on the subject?
Okay, so I see we have a couple of guests today. So I was wondering if someone could give us a quick summary of the chapter. What happened in chapter 16? Who remembers? It's basically this whole week we just did chapter 16. So, yes, Nate.
Some sages who were in Vaikuntha and they looked like little boys, they walked through 6 gates, and then on the 7th gate, right before they're about to get to Lord Vishnu, Jai and Vijay stopped. And it's because they look like little kids and they're naked. And yeah, Vaikuntha has a little bit more on reference, so that just wasn't as acceptable.
Okay, yeah, that's a pretty much good summary. The Kumaras, yes. You want to add something, Jonathan?
After that point, in the 4 Kumars cursed Jai and Vijay, and then Lord Vishnu made an appearance, and he gave his judgment equal to both, and he said that he would allow that curse, and that's pretty much where we're at right now. They're on their way. They're on their way back down.
So, quick pop quiz. What do you think were the themes that came up in chapter 16? What do you think were the themes that came up on, like in Monday's class and Tuesdays? Yes, Kartikeya.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
So, Bruce? You lost it?
Hold on.
When we can't understand Krishna's plan.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else? Yeah, so what came up was the Vaishnava aparad. Krishna takes that really seriously when we offend his devotees. And then also there was developing faith and trust in Krishna, trusting that he knows what's best, even though, as you say, Bruce, we cannot even understand what it is that he's trying to do. We should just trust that he knows what's best. And today is pretty much, yes, that everything is Krishna's plan. Everything happens because Krishna wants it to happen. And it's by the will of Krishna, right? So we're going to be looking at text 26. Okay, I did practice this, but I don't remember. Okay. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Can someone remind me of the leader? Yeah. Eta Sureta Ragatim Pratiparya Sarya. Samramba Sambrita Samaryanubhara Yoga. Uya Sakasha Mupayashyata Ashu Yoga. Sapo Mayeva Nimitastata Veta Vipra. Eta Sureta Ragatim Pratiparya Sarya. Samramba Sambrita Samadhyanubhara Yoga. Uya Sakasha Mupayashyata Ashu Yoga. Sapo Mayeva Nimitastata Veta Vipra. Please chant.
Eka sure saragatem pratipadya sadhya. Samprita samadhya nupadya yoga. Ya sakasam payasya tasya yoga. Mayeva nimitata
Okay. We can read the word for word together. Shri Bhagavan Uvacha. Supreme Personality of Godhead replied, Vedo Sura Itan Dhamaya Padya Sadhya Samramba and Sambrita intensified Samadhi concentration of mind. Anuvada firmly, Yoga united with me. Bhuya again, Sakasham to my presence. Upayashyata shortly, Ashu shortly, Ya which, Va curse, Maya Pramini, Eva alone, Vidya Pade, that So, translation. Thanks, Divine Grace. The Lord replied, O Brahmanas, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me, and therefore they will fall to a birth in a demoniac family. But they will be firmly united with me in thought through mental concentration, intensified by anger, and they will return to my presence shortly. So does anything stand out from that text? Yes, Jonathan.
Okay, so plot twist. Correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm interpreting this incorrectly. He had already planned this, and he had already planned for them to go back down and for them to go through these different lives and pastimes with them. But from what we were like discussing, it was because he had somebody he wanted to fight. But now it sounds like he already had some beef with them because they wouldn't let his girl back in.
It's, I mean, you got the first part. You didn't have beef with them, sure. But that's also what stood out for me, that sentence where it says, know that the punishment you inflicted on them was originally ordained by me. So it's not like the Kumaras came to the to Vaikuntha Loka, to the gates, to Jai and Vijay by their own volition, right? They didn't come just by their own. Krishna had arranged this. He knew that he had this desire and he needed to fulfill it in some way because Krishna is the Almighty, right? So if someone curses his devotee, he can override that curse. But he was like, nah, I'm going to let it play out because this was his plan. This was his original plan. Not because he had beef, though. He wasn't mad at them. He had other desires as to why he wanted them to fall from Vaikuntha. So why do you think actually he wanted Jai and Vijay to descend from the Vaikuntha lokas, the spiritual planets?
To have loving exchange with them.
Yeah. Through what? We did touch on it in Madhananda's class. He had a certain reason as to why he wanted. He wanted to fight. Yeah, exactly. If someone could read the first paragraph of the purport, we'll see the Lord's desire. Yes, Cersei.
The Lord stated that the punishment inflicted by the sages upon the doorkeepers, Jai and Vijay, was conceived by the Lord himself. Without the Lord's sanction, nothing can happen. It is to be understood that there was a plan in the cursing of the Lord's devotees in Vaikuntha, and his plan is explained by many stalwart authorities. The Lord sometimes desires to fight. The fighting spirit also exists in the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, how could fighting be manifested at all? Because the Lord is the source of everything, anger and fighting are also inherent in his personality. When he desires to fight with someone, he has to find an enemy. But in the Vaikuntha world, there is no enemy because everyone is engaged fully in his service. Therefore, he sometimes comes to the material world as an incarnation in order to manifest his fighting spirit.
Thank you. Yes. So Krishna had the desire to fight. He wanted to, I mean, sometimes Krishna he has this energy and he's like, okay, I just want to fight with some of my friends. But that doesn't happen in the spiritual world, because in the spiritual world, they're just all fully engaged in spiritual activities and serving Krishna. Imagine someone is serving you and you just punch them in the face. I mean, that's ridiculous, right? That's crazy. So he would, yeah. So he has to arrange for it so that he can fight, right? So bless you. So therefore he comes to the material world. And so therefore he comes to the material world. But he can't fight with the materialists. That's just not a fair fight, right? To fight with the materialists. So he brings his associates with him. So that's why they fall from the demoniac planets. But he can't just take them down with him. He's got to arrange a whole plan. You know, he's a planner. So you arrange a whole pastime as to why they're going to fall from the spiritual planets so that they can engage in this nice spiritual lila on the material platform. And even though Krishna orchestrated this entire situation with regards to the Kumars coming and cursing Jai and Vijay and them taking birth in demoniac families, he still gave them the choice. Madananda mentioned this, I remember. He still gave them the choice. He was like, hey, you can either have 3 births in a demoniac family and then come back to me, or you can have 6 births in a Brahmana family and then come back to me. But they were like, yeah, I'm going to do 3 births. And that's what he wanted, because he wanted them to be demons so that he could fight them. Because imagine if they decided they wanted to be Brahmanas and I was like, oh, I'm going to punch them. It quite work like that. So, yeah. So without the Lord's sanction, nothing can happen, right? So without Krishna making the arrangement, nothing will actually happen. So that kind of begs the question, if Krishna sanctions everything, if he plans for everything, if he allows everything, does that include evil doings? Does that include war? Does that include famine? Does that include all these bad things that we're experiencing in the material world? If he sanctions everything, how can he sanction something like that? Any ideas? Cersei?
Free will. We have free will to do the bad things that we want to do, and he just sort of lets us play out our desires.
That's true. Exactly. Yes, Bruce.
Laws of nature, like karma, cause and effect.
Yeah, there's a whole argument called theodicy, that if God is all good, all knowing, and all powerful, then why is there evil? So Western philosophers and theologians can't really solve this problem. When you take reincarnation and karma into the picture, it solves the whole problem. I was going to elucidate on that a little bit more, but I forgot. I lost my train. That's basically so. Yeah, no, that's basically it.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Yes, Nate? Oh.
We think that we're like, why would Krishna let us suffer? But suffering is just like attachment to the mind and body. And at some point, we're gonna like look back on our life and see that we were never suffering because we were never these things that we thought we were.
That's good. Yeah. Mr. Prabhu? Yes. Prabhu?
What Nate is saying is kind of along the same lines of what I was going to say, is that in the ultimate issue, evil and wrongdoing and suffering are illusion. They're illusory. And Krishna gives the kind of the answer to this in the 2nd chapter of the Gita, that the soul is untouched by everything that happens on the material platform. So the soul can't be cut, the soul can't be killed, it can't be dried, it can't be wetted, it can't be changed actually in any way. And so everything that plays out on the material platform is ultimately for the soul an experience that we're having, because it's what we chose. It's the thing that we wanted. We wanted to forget the Lord and try to enjoy separately from him. But reaction is built in, cause and effect is built in, so that we don't get comfortable here and never want to go back.
I think Arjuna.
I guess I'd like to say, Lord being the source of all good, material world being a place where we can be separate and feel that it's almost like their faith is solution. So, seem like
Can you repeat the question?
Can I repeat the question? Why would Krishna sanction these types of things, these so-called evil doings?
See. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay. Jonathan?
I would like to comment on something Gopal Prabhu was saying that Christians, there's lots of those videos on YouTube you can find. These preachers, they go up on a square and start preaching to people, and there's always somebody in the crowd starts challenging, what kind of God would allow this to happen? All these kids dying? Why would you let kids die? You know, it's a good point that unless they realize that there is karma from previous lives, a lot of people tend to go for not taking that to be, present. So they become serious atheists. Not just serious, they hate, even if it's there, they hate the guy because he allows this to happen. So, our philosophy is just so perfect. It's just, it answers all of those concerns, all those questions so nicely. Gopal Prabhu wants to add something.
Yeah, it's the conclusion they come to, the Western philosophers and theologians, the conclusion they come to is God's not perfect. That's the conclusion. People have written books, why bad things happen to good people. Used to say we're good, but why are we here? But no, yeah, so yeah, their conclusion is that God's not perfect. He's a nice God, but he's not perfect either. That's the conclusion philosophers and theologians come up with.
After 9/11, there was this rabbi, and he tried to address that question: how could God, who is all good and all powerful, let this happen? 9/11, and yeah, his conclusion was that, that God has to be all good, but perhaps he's not all powerful, and that's why he's imperfect. And so Gopal saying he's not all powerful, so sometimes bad things happen like that. So it's not the most strong argument for why bad things happen. And yeah, it's hard, as there's so many horrible things that happen to all kinds of people, and even devotees, even to devotees. So accidents or whatnot. It's just like how do you present the philosophy of karma while having empathy, at the same time presenting it for the benefit of everybody. But yeah, somehow the other, all these various things are for us to evolve spiritually and learn various lessons. And as long as we don't learn our various lessons that we're meant to learn, and then yeah, we'll keep being in that cycle, and it'll always be the same complaint with a different set of people or different set of circumstances. I've noticed that it's always the same issue, and it's like, and then now everybody or everything is wrong, but actually there's that one lesson that we're not learning. Yeah, even though there's different circumstances, different people, it's the one lesson we're missing. So,
I'm gonna continue. Sorry. Can you save it for the end? Can you save it for the end? Is that okay? Okay. So yes, everything that you guys were saying is valid. That's true. And what I think of when this question comes up, why would Krishna sanction all these things? I like to think of it as a parent with their child, you know? So they know better because they've lived longer, but they want us to be happy. So they're just going to give us what we want because we keep nagging. So, for example, if you're a child and you want to stick your finger in an electrical socket, your mom is obviously going to say, no, you're going to get electrocuted. dumb. You're just like, no, it's gonna be fun. I really want to do it. I really want to do it. So Krishna, your mom, is like, okay, you know what? This is how you're gonna learn. I'm going to allow you to do it. He doesn't want to, but it's like you have to learn your lesson, so he's going to, you know? So it hurts him to allow his devotees to get hurt, but he understands that this is the bigger picture. This is the plan. This is how you're going to come back to me. Okay? Because you are not listening to me, so you need to learn on your own. Okay? But even in those situations, you know, where we experience suffering, we forget that Krishna is still actually there and he's still actually protecting us. Like, the things that happen to us are actually supposed to be like 10 times worse. You know, we're supposed to experience it on a different level. But Krishna is still protecting us, and he's like, okay, I'm going to allow you to suffer, but I'm going to protect you still. I'm going to make it less than what it's supposed to be. So Krishna is still always there, even though we are struggling, because he's waiting for us. He's just waiting for us to turn towards him, right? Okay, and then another thing to actually remember is that, yes, nothing can happen without Krishna sanctioning it, without him allowing it to happen, but he doesn't plan for us to suffer. That's not part of his plans. Krishna doesn't make a plan. He's like, okay, I know they're going to suffer from this. No, he makes plans, and then because of our desires, because of our material inclinations, we cause our own suffering. And then he doesn't step in because he will just have to continuously step in if we're suffering, and then we're not going to learn. So he doesn't step in, he just lets it play out, okay? Because Krishna is this perfectly moral being, right? So he's not going to just allow people to suffer for the sake of allowing them to suffer. There are reasons. He wants to bring us closer to him. He wants us to remember him and turn to him so that we can come back to him. Okay? Any questions about that?
Prabhupada tells a story about this child who wanted to put a finger in a spinning fan. Everybody was saying, no, 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 don't do it. And that was an uncle in the family. He said, no, 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 let him do it. But you unplug the fan. So they unplugged it, so there was no more, intense rotation of fins. And he got hurt, but not enough to damage him too much. So an example is that's why the Varnashram, that's why with the Varnashram system, the Vedic system, is there to cushion that blast we were to get otherwise.
Yes, exactly. So we still get hurt, but not as much as we were supposed to, right? Yes, Rosita.
What I'm hearing in everybody's conclusion can be summed up by saying that ultimately the suffering in the material world is this is going to sound crazy, but is a manifestation of the Lord's mercy and compassion. Because he doesn't want to violate our will, so he allows us to come and forget him and reap the consequences of our desires and actions. But the suffering is built in. Otherwise, we would never want to go back. We would forget and never remember. So all of these things that unfold, these evil and suffering unfold so that we begin to inquire at a certain point, why do I suffer? Is this, really what life is? And that inquiry brings us eventually to a place where the Lord, begins to reveal the truth. He comes to us in the form of the devotees and teaches us that we're not the body.
Yes.
I just want to read a very short excerpt of the Gita, and where this is described as things that go on by Krishna's will in the material world. And the translation of the verse is in chapter 11. He says, "Therefore get up, prepare to fight and win glory. Conquer all your enemies and enjoy a flourishing kingdom. You are already put to death by my arrangement. And you, O Sabyasachi, can be but an instrument in the fight." Basically, kind of saying what he told Janvita, or the four Kumar. I was like, this was already set up by my arrangement. So they were just his instrument, as you were saying. So Then he goes, Srila Prabhupada says, the whole world is moving according to the plan of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Foolish persons who do not have sufficient knowledge think that nature is moving without a plan and all manifestations are but accidental formations. There are so many so-called scientists who suggest that perhaps it was like this or maybe like that, but there's no question of perhaps maybe. There's a specific plan carried out in the material world. What is this plan? Srila Prabhupada tells us, he says, this cosmic manifestation is a chance for conditioned souls to go back home, back to God.
Thank you. Yeah. So Krishna has the vision, right? Our vision is very limited. We can't really see past our own nose. Krishna has this, he has the entire vision. He knows what he's doing. He just wants us to trust in him, understand that he's the supreme controller, because that will give us real protection, right? But the thing to remember with regards to Krishna being the supreme controller is that yes, he's the supreme controller, but he doesn't force us. He doesn't force us to do anything, right? So he's the supreme controller, but there's no force. There's always free will. And then another thing that I wanted to mention with regards to understanding Krishna as the supreme controller and that nothing will happen without his sanction, nothing will happen without his will, is that doesn't allow us to just give up and be like, oh, you know, whatever Krishna wants, Krishna gets. It'll happen as it's meant to happen. That, for example, that doesn't mean we get into a car, we don't put on our seatbelt, and we just drive recklessly and like, oh, it's Krishna's will, what will happen, will happen. You know, we still have to take responsibility for our actions. Because Krishna gives us that choice, you know, to make decisions. So we still have to be responsible in how we approach him, right? We can't just try and die and think that we're going to go to Krishna because like, oh, this is Krishna's plan. We don't get to decide what Krishna's plan is. That's not for us to decide. Okay. So yeah, so basically what we spoke about now is that Krishna is the supreme controller. Nothing can happen without his sanction. And the reason that Giant Vijay went to the material world is because he just had a desire to fight. That's what he wanted to do. Does anyone have any comments or questions before we go to the next part?
So in regards to Giant Vijay, we know that one of the incarnations was, what was it, Lord Chinese Lila? No. Jagadananda, yes. So Lord Nityananda, he heard about them, and he wouldn't let them live. He would chase them, and he would preach to them, and they would run away from them. They were like, "What's your problem? Just leave us alone." So in terms of Lord is not going to force you. Oh, Nityananda will force you, especially if you say Krishna's name once. Krishna will never leave you. He will keep going after you, life after lifetime. So.
A comment on this last point that you made in your class now. Devotees sometimes use it as an excuse. Oh no, Krishna's in control. The most ridiculous context I've seen that in is when, devotees, I would say their biggest weakness is they can never be on time for anything. And I've heard devotees use this excuse when they're late. They're like, oh, don't worry, Krishna's in control. This is Krishna's plan.
Yeah, it's quite vain of us to think that we know what Krishna's plan is. Oh, excuse me. Did Advaita go?
I think it was from South Africa when they were driving Prabhupada to the airport and they were late. So the devotee actually dared to suggest that what Gopi was saying.
Oh.
Must be. Prabhupada turned to him, no, it is your nonsense, you rascal.
That's good. Okay. Last comment by Kartikeya, yeah?
I was just thinking, I was talking to the devotee yesterday, and we were just kind of walking, and we thought it was very interesting that often we think, yeah, this is God's plan for me when it's convenient, you know, and when it's not, it's like, yeah, no, that's not God's plan for me.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that we think that we know what God wants for us, you know, but it's only ever when it's good things. It's like it's never really bad things. Like, why would you do this to me? Well, you have to learn something. Can someone read the next paragraph, please? Bruce?
In Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 8, it is also said that the Lord appears just to give protection to the devotees and to annihilate the non-devotees. The non-devotees are found in the material world, not in the spiritual world. Therefore, when the Lord wants to fight, he has to come to this world. But who will fight with the Supreme Lord? No one is able to fight with him. Therefore, because the Lord's pastimes in the material world are always performed with his associates, not with others, he has to find some devotee who will play the part of an enemy. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says to Arjuna, "My dear Arjuna, both you and I have appeared many, many times in this material, but you have forgotten, whereas I remember." Thus, Jaya and Vijay were selected by the Lord to fight with him in the material world, and that was the reason the sages came to see him, and accidentally the doorkeepers were cursed. It was the Lord's desire to send them to the material world, not perpetually, but for some time. Therefore, just as on a theatrical stage, someone takes the part of an enemy to the proprietor of the stage, although the play is for a short time, and there is no permanent enmity between the servant and the proprietor, so the Surajana devotees were cursed by the sages to go to the Asurajanas, or atheistic families. That a devotee should come into an atheistic family is surprising, but it is simply a show. After finishing their mock fighting, both the devotee and the Lord are again associated in the spiritual planets. That is very explicitly explained here. The conclusion is that no one falls from the spiritual world or Vaikuntha planet, for it is the eternal abode. But sometimes, as the Lord desires, devotees come into this material world as preachers or atheists. In each case, you must understand that there is a plan of the Lord. Lord Buddha, for example, was an incarnation, yet he preached atheism. There is no God. But actually, there was a plan behind this, as explained in the Bhagavatam.
So that just summarizes basically what we spoke about, right? How Krishna has a plan, and when he wants to do something, he organizes for it to happen, and it's kind of like a movie. It's kind of like a show that we're watching. They're not actually enemies. It's just this one thing that he wants to do, and we're going to go back to the spiritual world, and we're going to have loving exchanges again. And this also, the fighting can be considered, you know, loving exchanges. So yeah, there was just one thing in this particular paragraph that I wanted to touch on. There's that one sentence that says, but sometimes, as the Lord desires, devotees come into this material world as preachers or as atheists. So I was thinking about some examples as to how he did that. He sent Lord Buddha, as it says here, to preach that there is no God. So sometimes this can make no sense to us. Like why would Krishna send his devotees to do something like that? But you know, Krishna has he has the unlimited vision, and he has a bigger plan. He understands why these things need to happen. If I understand correctly, I believe in the time of Lord Buddha, he came because there was misinterpretation of the Vedas. They were using it to justify their violent behavior. So Lord Buddha came and he preached ahimsa, nonviolence, you know, and he was just kind of like, let's put the Vedas aside for now, and this is what we're going to do. I'm going to preach how to be nonviolent. So that was Krishna's plan, to teach them that you're actually not supposed to be violent with regards to practicing the bhakti yoga. And there are other examples as well. He sent Jesus Christ, Prahlad Maharaj. So it's like these exalted personalities that he sent down. So the reason I'm touching on this is because we shouldn't confuse ourselves for these exalted personalities. We shouldn't think, oh, Lord Krishna sent me down to be a preacher or to be in these atheistic families so that I can teach the rest of the material world how to come to Lord Krishna, right? Because it says here that ultimately no one falls from the Vaikuntha planet, right? So we are conditioned souls. We were not in the Vaikuntha planets. We're trying to get there, but we weren't there. So the souls in the Vaikuntha planets, they descend down, they come to teach a lesson, and then they go back up. And we, as the conditioned souls, are trying to get there. So we shouldn't get confused with that particular statement, thinking, oh, maybe I am one of the souls that have been sent down to preach Krishna's message. And I mean, this message of no one falls from the spiritual planets it's all over Shastra. I have like many quotes here, but I'm not going to go too into it. So basically, what we have to learn from this class really is that we need to understand that Krishna is the supreme controller. Nothing will happen without his sanction. There is a plan, and we should just learn to accept his plan, because that would mean less suffering for us as well. It's kind of selfish, it's kind of selfish to think, okay, I'm just going to go with Krishna's plan, because then it's less suffering for ourselves. But I mean, that's good. And then another thing is that we should try not to be disturbed by it. We shouldn't be disturbed by his plan, whether it's good things that are happening for us or we're suffering. We should just not be reactive either way. We should always just be concentrated on Krishna, because we don't understand his plan. That's the only thing that we know for sure. We don't understand his plan. So we just have to think of him and how we can get back to him, because we know that his plans have a higher purpose, and it's to bring us back to him. And if we fight it, it's just going to cause more suffering. Yeah, we obviously want to be done with this material world. We don't want to suffer anymore. It's kind of annoying, getting real tired. So, yeah. Anyone have any questions or comments? Correction? Yes.
In Queen Kunti's prayers, she says that, pardon me, that nobody will seek the Lord earnestly unless they become materially exhausted, and that she actually prays to Krishna that the calamities that they have experienced as a family, that they would continue more and more, because it gave her and her family the opportunity to seek the Lord earnestly. And I don't suggest that you necessarily pray for calamities, but the material world has enough calamities in and of itself without praying for them. But suffering gives us the opportunity to turn to the Lord. And if there wasn't any, we would never become materially exhausted.
I mean, we should be so lucky to suffer the way that Prahlad and Kunti, the Pandavas suffered, because their suffering just led them to Krishna, just made them think of Krishna, and our suffering makes us think of ourselves. Oh, why me? What can I do? How can I get out of this? Because we're so self-absorbed. Their suffering is counting.
Yeah, I was thinking another pastime of the Lord fighting his devotee. Lord Chaitanya and Advaitacharya wanted to get a different flavor of exchange than he was getting from Lord Chaitanya, because Lord Chaitanya saw him as a senior, and in all in like reverential kind of mood. So here we see where that in this purport that Krishna is saying that, or Srila Prabhupada saying that Krishna sometimes sends his devotees as atheists. So Advaitacharya starts to speak this philosophy that really upsets Lord Chaitanya. And then Lord Chaitanya starts to beat him up, and the people around are like, "Oh my God, he's gonna kill him! He's an old man. Someone please stop him!"
Yeah, does that so that we can learn. Okay, thank you. I'm trying to make a time to keep. Super podcast.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Bhagavad Mahaprasadam ki.